On Saturday morning, on the Jewish holy day, the Sabbath, and on the Festival of Tabernacles of Sukkot, thousands of Hamas terrorists came from the Gaza Strip. They infiltrated Israel, they broke through the border, and they came into dozens of Israeli towns and villages and communities. And when they went in there, they began a murderous rampage, murdering men, women, and children. We've got reports just now, in the last 10 minutes, that in one of the small communities that we went into, the troops have only managed to go into today, we have discovered 40 dead babies, a number of whom have been decapitated. They've had their heads cut off. Babies. This is what Hamas have done on Saturday. They murdered people. They shot children in front of their parents. They shot parents in front of their children. They kidnapped babies as young as 6 months and took them to Gaza. They have taken over 85-year-old Holocaust survivors and taken them into Gaza. They have kidnapped children, they've kidnapped women, they've kidnapped dads, mothers, grandmas, grandpas. Those who were they unable to kidnap, they shot. In one particular case, there was somebody they tried to kidnap. She was elderly, she was infirmed, she couldn't walk, so they burned her alive. How do we know these stories? Because Hamas was so proud of what they've done, they filmed it and they posted it to social media. We just heard the story of a young girl who found out her grandmother was died and was murdered because when she turned on her phone the next day and looked at the Facebook feed of her grandmother, Hamas had taken her grandmother's private phone, filmed them murdering with a knife her grandmother, leaving her on the floor in a pool of blood, and they posted it to the Facebook page of the grandmother. This is the barbarism that we are dealing with. These are a terror group that have no mercy, that have decided that they want to slaughter Israelis and destroy the state of Israel. Nearly 1,000 Israelis were murdered in one day. That's the greatest number of Jews who were killed in one day since the Holocaust. But they didn't only kill Israelis, they killed from other countries as well. They killed Arabs, they killed Israeli Arabs, they killed from many different countries. And they kidnapped over 100 Israeli citizens who are now being held in Gaza. And so Israel is going to react. We have declared war on Hamas. And it's important to state at this point that this is not a war between Israel and Palestine. This is not about Israel and Palestine. This is about Israel and Hamas. This is about good and evil. This is about civilization and barbarism. Either you stand with people who are defending themselves, or you stand with those who cut the heads off babies. That's what this is about. It's not about anything else. Okay? We are in Nigeria at the moment, and unfortunately Nigeria has also known terrorism. You know what it's like when terror groups like Boko Haram kidnap young girls. There's never a reason for it except for hate. When terrorists blow up the United Nations building here in Abuja, there's no reason for it except for hate. This is not about religion. This is not about Islam or Judaism or Christianity. This is about evil and good. These Hamas terrorists are not acting in the name, they're using the name of Islam. But there is no Muslim, and I have spoken to many, many Muslims, imams, religious leaders who have expressed their shock and their outrage and their disgust of what we've seen, because they know that this gives a bad name. to anybody who is claiming to be doing this in the name of Islam, and they're not. And it should be really, really clear that this is really nothing to do with that. So Israel is going to do what it needs to do in the coming days and weeks in order to destroy Hamas. Because if you want peace and you want to see an accommodation between Israelis and Palestinians, then Hamas can have no part of that. These are not people who you have peace with. I remind you of two other things, that in 1993 we signed the Oslo Accords, which was meant to be a new age of peace with Israel and the Palestinians. The first people to reject that were Hamas. Hamas were the ones who say there can never be peace, there can never be anything but the destruction of Israel, the death of all Israelis, the death of all Jews. And those people who say, well, maybe this is about occupation. In 2005, Israel left the Gaza Strip. Every single soldier, every single civilian left. Every single one, every single Israeli. So this is not about that. This is not about it at all in any way whatsoever. And we as a people are in shock. We are in mourning. And anybody who tries to justify this, I think that that is clear to all of us, that anyone who won't condemn this, anyone who won't come out in a clear voice condemning this, needs to ask where their moral compass is. Because if you can't loudly and clearly condemn the murder of nearly 1,000 civilians, of cutting off the heads of babies. There was a music festival that was taking place in the south there. A music festival. Okay, a great music festival where young people, teenagers were partying. And along came Hamas and gunned them down. Over 260 young partygoers were murdered in the middle of a party. There are reports of these terrorists raping women in front of their boyfriends and then killing them all. This was deliberate massacre on a mass scale, and it's important that you all understand that, and it's important that we understand that this is what we've been dealing with. I'm going to take some questions if people have got questions on this. Some pictures. Before we go on to the questions, I am going to show, again, I ask you not to show your cameras at this yet. We're about to show you some pictures. These are incredibly disturbing pictures, and I need you to understand, you can look away, but I would encourage you not. These are people who were gunned down in the street. Can you press play? It's necessary. This is one of those cases where it's necessary and where it's justified. We will do everything we can to avoid civilian casualties. We will do everything we can. But civilians will get killed, and we should prepare ourselves for that. The difference is this, that in countries like Israel, in countries like Nigeria, we have an army that protects us. We have an army whose job is to stand in front of the civilians. First you have the army, then you have the civilians. The army is on the front line. Hamas are the opposite. They take the civilians and they put them in front of them. Hamas operate out of schools. Their major headquarters are under the hospital in Gaza. They have taken our kidnapped Israeli citizens, babies as young as 6 months old, and said they will put them in front of them when they are fighting against Israelis. They've said they are going to go on live TV and kill them on live TV. So in this war, we will do everything we can to avoid civilian casualties, because it doesn't do any long-term good for anyone like that. We will do everything we can, but I need to be clear, civilians will die. There is no war that ever takes place where you surgically are able to only kill the enemy, especially when they're terrorists who are deliberately hiding behind civilians.
Yes. These so-called avoid repercussion on the state of Israel.
Yeah, look, there will be economic implications of a war. War is expensive primarily in human costs, but it's also economically expensive. And we've had to fight a few wars in the past, but our economy has always recovered, because ultimately long-term terror threat from Hamas is much more dangerous economically and to the long-term survival of an economically viable Israel than it is to not being there. So we will do what we need to do. We will take the economic hit in the short run to know that in the long run we will bounce back, that our economy is strong, our economy is stable. But at this point we're not thinking about the economy. We're thinking about the nearly 1,000 Israelis who were murdered in cold blood on the streets as they walked around, as they stood at bus stops, as they sat in their homes. And we will make sure that never, ever happens again.
Okay, next one is the reports.
1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll carry on, then we'll do the next round. Welcome that. They have no right to be holding women and children. They've kidnapped them. To be very clear, any women or young people that are in Israeli prisons have been tried and have been convicted of terror offenses. The fact that somebody's 14 and they try to stab another child in the street, or they try to stab a woman, or they stab a woman, doesn't make them innocent. It doesn't keep them a child. It makes them a terrorist. I've heard also the reports that you've seen. Anybody who can call on Hamas to release their hostages, and I think that the minimum we should expect is every country in the world should be calling on Hamas to immediate release their kidnapped victims. You know, we know what it's like, and I know that for Nigerians, when the Chibok girls were kidnapped, when the world immediately condemned it and immediately said release those girls, it gave support and it gave moral backing, and Israel was one of the first countries, as I'm sure you remember, Israel was one of the first countries to call for the immediate release of those girls and condemned it immediately. And so I think that every country in the world should be condemning this, and every country should be calling for the immediate release of kidnapped hostages.
Okay, yesterday the briefing by the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, spoke about measures that Israel is trying to take revenge and get release of.
Calling on anybody to leave Israel. We believe we can protect everybody in Israel, but obviously it's a question for the Nigerian government to decide what to do about Nigerian citizens. We are focusing at this point on making sure that everybody is safe, and the best way to do that is to eliminate Hamas.
Your Excellency, I wanted to know if there is a fresh disagreement between Israeli and the Hamas terror group, why that may have led to this recent attack.
Okay. Look, is there ever a reason for people to do what they've done? There's no reason, there's no rationale. Was there a reason for anybody to carry out terror attack? Was there a reason for Boko Haram to kidnap the Chibok girls? No. Was there a reason for ISWAP that they're doing now when they're carrying out terror attacks? There's no reason. They'll tell you a reason. They'll make something up. They'll lie. Remember, if you're a person who is willing to murder a baby and cut off their head, you're also willing to lie to make up a story of why you did it. And so there is no reason. There is no justification. Hamas, in their charter, and I encourage you even to read their charter. Don't take my word for it. Take their word for it. Hamas, in their charter, say very openly that they want the death of every single Jew in the world, that they want the end of the state of Israel. And if I can, I'm going to read you a quote. And the reason I'm going to read you this quote is because it's by the leader of Hamas, and he said this in December. He said, and this was Mahmoud al-Zahar, and you can check this in December, he said, the entire 510 million square kilometers of planet Earth will come under a system where there is no justice, no injustice, no oppression, no Zionism, and no treacherous Christianity. Okay, so their aim is not only to destroy Israel, their aim is to spread their hate across the world, to wipe out all the Christians in the world. That's their stated claim. They said it in December. We can send you the link to him saying it. That's not a problem. But just understand who these people are. Is there a reason why they should do that? If tomorrow they started killing Christians, is there a reason? No, it's based on utter hate.
Okay, in as much as this sounds very tough and difficult for Israel, and they're looking
At this point, we are acting in the way that any country in the world would act. How would you want your government in Nigeria to act if somebody had come across the border and murdered nearly 1,000 of your civilians in cold blood in 24 hours? And again, we're not talking about soldiers, we're talking about civilians, we're talking about babies, we're talking about young children. One of the other videos I chose not to show you is of a family where in front of the family they shoot the eldest daughter and kill her, and then they tease the two young children and the parents that they've shot their daughter and killed her, and they force them to watch it. And they start saying to them, this is what we're going to do. So no one's talking here about, you don't have a truce and you don't have a peace with barbarism. You don't decide, well, okay, we'll let these people, we'll just leave it be for a little bit. No, we're going to take this apart. We're going to take them apart. We're going to destroy Hamas infrastructure. We are going to destroy the Hamas leadership in every sense, and we are going to make sure that they can never, ever, ever do this again, ever, to anybody.
Thank you so much.
What is your message to the Palestinian Authority, especially as the attack is going to be within Palestine?
And a follow-up also to the world. What are you seeking
Okay.
from the world? Right? Then another follow-up, sorry please. I'm just coming from the press briefing of the Palestinian ambassador to Nigeria. He said Hamas is not a terrorist group. He said that. And again he said they are fighting the right cause, that this injustice has gone on for too long. What's your reaction to that?
So I'm not even going to answer the question about whether Hamas is a terror organization myself. I'm going to ask you. That looks like somebody who is anything but a terror organization. I would ask anybody here, I don't care if you're a Jew, if you're a Christian, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Buddhist, if you're any religion or you have no religion. If you can't describe what we just saw as terrorism, then I would say there is no terrorism in the world. If you can't condemn what we just saw, then understand the world that you are leading into. And I think that unfortunately, it says much more about him than it does about anything else. If you won't condemn that, I think you've lost hope. And what is my message to the Palestinians? My message to the Palestinian is, we're not in a war with the Palestinians. We're in a war with Hamas. The Palestinians are on the same territory that we are. They are our neighbors. I have 2 young children. I want a better life for my 2 young children, and I want a better life for my grandchildren. That is only going to happen if I have peace. That is only going to happen if I can have accommodation with my neighbors, if I can make a better life. These people don't want that to happen. They don't want that to happen. So if you really want peace between Israelis and Palestinians, we can't have Hamas in the world. If you really want there to be a better future, that's not a better future. That's not a better future for anybody. That's terrifying. And I would say to my Palestinian colleague, if you can't condemn this murder, and you can't condemn this outrage, how do you expect us to have faith in you to be able to have a joint peace with you? How can we ever sit with someone who says this isn't terrorism, this is acceptable? How can you ever, ever, ever hope for a better future? And what's our message to the world? We've seen the vast majority of the countries of the world condemning this and saying that Israel needs to act and Israel needs to respond and Israel needs to defend its people. Our message to the world is we're going to do that. We're going to defend our people, we're going to react, and we are going to do everything that we possibly can to make sure this never ever happens again, and do everything to avoid civilian casualties, but also to make it clear this is not a war with the Palestinians. This is not an Israel-Palestine issue. This is not a Jewish-Islam issue. This is an issue between good and evil between civilization and barbarism.
Follow up to that. Are you asking Palestine to hand over Hamas to you, to Israel?
Listen, if Hamas would surrender, this would be over tomorrow morning. If terrorism it would be over. That's not realistic. I'm not asking the Palestinians anything. I'm saying to the Palestinians, I want a better day. I'm saying at this point, I am focused on Hamas. I am focused on dealing with Hamas, and I am focused on stopping it. I also want to add one more thing, which is I want to dispel a myth. One of the myths that Hamas are throwing around, one of the lies, and there are so many lies I don't know where. If you want to understand, by the way, and you talk about lies, you can go and have a look at Sky News, and I know I'm not meant to talk about other news stations, but have a look at Sky News in the UK where they interviewed the leader of Hamas. And he said to them, you know, we've not killed any civilians. And the host said, what are you talking about? We saw 260 at the park. Look at the pictures. What do you mean you've not killed? And he basically says, well, you know, they're basically Jews. We don't consider them civilians. So he says, we haven't killed any civilians. Okay, so the guy they'll lie. So what's the great lie and what's the great myth? That they've spread it's all about the Al-Aqsa Mosque is one of the great things they're talking about. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is in Jerusalem. I know that many Nigerians have seen it and visited it. I know that some people here may have even visited it in the past. There is total freedom of access, freedom of religion on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israel guarantees freedom of religion to all the major religions, to all of the holy sites, to all of the holy sites. All of the repair work, all of the maintenance work is done by Jordan. We give access to Jordan to do all of that on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So you should know that the Muslims, the Waqf, has total control over the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Jews have control over the temple, over the Western Wall, the holiest site in Judaism. And the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is run by the Christians. Because that's what happens when you have total freedom of religion. Each religion is responsible. You saw over Ramadan, and it's not only Ramadan, okay? Muslims have free, unfettered access to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Anything else is a lie. And just because they keep saying it doesn't mean it's true. Just because, and you told me that the Palestinian representative here says they're not terrorists, doesn't make it true. I ask you, listen, just because I've said it, I'm saying to you, be just as critical with me. Take the evidence. Look at it yourselves and make your minds up. Okay, if you think I'm wrong, and actually this isn't terrorism, this is perfectly legitimate, okay? But make your decisions. I want to finally just show you a couple of photos again. The kidnapped. And then we'll have another couple of questions. I just want you to see a couple of the photos. It's important for me to show a couple of, these are perfectly clean photos. But these are some of, see this woman, 85 years old, with dementia. See these two children? See the girl being pulled away? The woman in the back, she doesn't even know where she is. The child being beaten, the people being taken out. Okay, this is a woman and her two young children. Okay, you can stop. You can stop. Okay, we've shown it to give you an idea of there's no people being taken. And again, I'll finish on this before I take the last questions. All the evidence of these massacres and of these atrocities is from Hamas themselves. They posted it on their own social media or in the sickest way on the social media of their victims. They are not ashamed of what they've done. They're genuinely proud of it.
Okay, so Israel has been known to be one of the most security-conscious countries in the world. And this unfortunate incident has been blamed on security lapses, security breakdown. And there's also been this insinuation that there could probably, if eventually they realize that there's an Israeli hand in this whole incident.
There was no Israeli hand. It's been checked. It's another one of the lies that are spread. There was no Israeli hand in this. It was a massive Israeli intelligence and security failure. Sometimes when the failure is so big, you have to look for other explanations, and that's where this myth has come from. We will investigate what happened. We will ask the difficult questions, but those questions will be for the day after. At this point now, we haven't even been able to identify all of our dead. Today, why did I tell you about the 40 babies? Because only today we managed to get into that small kibbutz of Kfar Aza. Only today we got into it to actually see how many people are in there. Only today we discovered it. We haven't even been able to identify all our dead. Some of the bodies are so badly burnt from what was done to them that we can't do it. They've been so badly mutilated. They've been so badly abused that we haven't yet buried our dead. And so there's still that process. There's still that going on. And you know, under Jewish law, you're meant to bury your dead on the same day. And so there's a trauma as well that's going on. We haven't even been able to identify them. As we said, the number at the moment is over 900. Unfortunately, we expect that to rise still significantly because we're still going through and finding it. So, sorry? Okay, so so my fear would be that it will be even higher than that. We're still discovering bodies. We're still counting. As I said to you, this will be the most deadly day. This will be the most deadly day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. And for many people, this reminds us of the Holocaust, of gunmen going door to door, pulling out Jewish children and shooting them dead on the street.
Condolences, because we also know that they said in a family, there's hardly anyone that didn't lose or don't know someone that lost someone in Israel.
On my embassy staff, and I'm not going to point there. On my embassy staff, there is no one who doesn't know someone. That's the size of the country. There's no one that doesn't know someone.
There are even some reports that the entire family.
So there are not reports. There are numerous families, and we have photos just of the family. By the way, we have photos of the last family shot of the mother, father, and 3 young children. We know that's the last photo they took, and all of them have been wiped out. And so what I would suggest is after this, if there are any of the videos or the photos, I know you've got a question, I'll come to it, but if there are any of the photos or the videos that you want, then be in touch with Zanswat, and we will. I'm not going to give you the tough photos. I'm just telling you that now because we'll blur them. We'll only give them to you if you blur identities and blur things, but if you want. But I think sometimes you need them people to understand quite what we're dealing with. And when you're facing people who say, oh, they're not terrorists, sometimes you actually have to let people make their own mind up by seeing. But yes, sir.
All right, Your Excellency, I start on to imagine. We know so well that this is a very global damage, and we know so well that.
To all friends of Israel and to all friends of good, of all friends of civilization, is we're about to have a war in order to make sure this never happens again to Israel. That war is going to be difficult. And at this point we have the world's sympathy, the world's understanding. I don't know if people saw U2, Bono, when his concert in Las Vegas the day before, sang their famous song Pride. He changed the lyrics to the word Pride to sing in memory of the 260 teenagers that were murdered at the music festival. We've seen the Eiffel Tower. We've seen all the major buildings in the UK, in the US, in Germany, in Romania, in Kosovo. I can go through the list. Lit up in Ukraine, lit up in blue and white, in solidarity with Israel in this terrible time. And over the coming days, as we start to go on the offensive, I would ask you to remember why we're doing this, what the basis is, because there will be some difficult days ahead for everybody, and for the Palestinians in Gaza, as we get and we tackle and we track down Hamas, it will be difficult. So I say, please remember that at the end of this, we're doing this for a better future for Israelis, but a better future for Palestinians, and a better future for the world, because I think everybody in here can agree that if we never have to see pictures like that again, that's only a good thing for the world.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.